In a hidden part of the University of Washington campus, hundreds of monkeys live and die for research. They undergo experimental surgeries and tests until their usefulness is over. The federal government pays the university millions for this research. But now a KOMO 4 problem solver investigation uncovers that some of those millions are in jeopardy. And the university is under investigation because of unauthorized experimental surgeries on monkeys. Problem solver Tracy Vetter reveals how the university ignored what could be $1 million problem.
Every year, UW scientists use hundreds of monkeys, from babies to adults, for all types of research that may help thousands.
To address, say, people who have strokes or people who have spinal cord injury.
But over the past year and a half, one group of researchers at the university has been at the center of a series of investigations for doing unauthorized surgeries on monkeys. Dozens of surgeries.
I think these are very serious violations. There are surgeries on animals' heads and on their eyes.
Researchers implant coils on the monkey's eyeballs, thread wires up the skull, and put a metal cylinder, sometimes two, into holes drilled in the monkey's skull. The problem solvers use public disclosure laws to get thousands of pages of internal emails and reports from the UW and federal agencies. Some of those surgeries were approved, many were not, as we found evidence that some monkeys underwent a dozen or more surgeries, as the eye coils and head chambers were removed and replaced again and again. Primatologist Deborah Durham works for PETA. She's read the monkeys' medical records and says there's evidence many of them suffered.
He pulls out his hair. He self-mutilates. He drinks his own urine.
Federal law requires all of UW's animal researchers and experiments to be approved and enforced by the university's Animal Oversight Committee. It goes by the acronym IACUC. What is IACUC's #1 concern?
Humane treatment of the animals in the course of scientifically necessary research.
But KOMO 4 problem solvers has uncovered evidence the IACUC ignored warnings about problems with surgeries on monkeys, and that even when a federal agency found protocol violations, the committee chose to close the investigation rather than look deeper. It started nearly 2 years ago when an international accrediting agency put the university on probation. That was primarily for problems with its buildings, but the agency also questioned the number of experimental surgeries on monkeys, as internal emails we found clearly show. What did IACUC do to respond to that?
Well, ALAC didn't give us a deficiency or anything like that about the number of surgeries performed on any given animal. It's up to the IACUC to approve those.
So the UW's Oversight Committee did nothing. Then 5 months later, the USDA found that 3 of researcher Albert Fuchs' monkeys had had many, many more surgeries than the rules allowed. As required, IACUC's Nona Phillips reported the violations with a phone call to the UW compliance officer, Sue Clausen. The problem solvers found these handwritten notes of that conversation where Clausen writes, "It's probably the tip of the iceberg," and referring to Phillips, she's going to keep her head in the sand on this. What is she referring to in that?
I really don't know, Tracy.
I literally stood and wrote notes while she talked.
But Clausen claims what Phillips said isn't what she meant.
And you're telling me that it's okay for her to say to you that she's going to put her head in the sand on this?
I'm saying that she used terminology that didn't reflect her intent to not do the right thing.
So she said these things to you, but she didn't mean this?
No.
After the USDA violations, no one from the IACUC looked to see if there were more unauthorized surgeries. You didn't look at all the rest of the monkeys in his protocol. You didn't look at the rest of his medical records. And you didn't look at his lab notes, right?
At that point, we did not, because we had no reason to think that the USDA had not identified all of the issues.
That's shameful.
IACUC closed the case on Dr. Fuchs with a letter of reprimand. PETA's Durham believes the university did put its head in the sand.
And when they choose to ignore violations, they're choosing to ignore suffering.
PETA complained to the National Institutes of Health, which reopened the investigation. Only then did Iacocca find that instead of 1 researcher and 3 monkeys subjected to too many experimental surgeries, there were 14 monkeys, 5 UW researchers, and 41 unauthorized surgeries. The UW insists it did everything it should.
No one was trying to cover it up. Everyone was being absolutely forthright and honest about it.
Now, the researchers under investigation brought in nearly $9 million in federal grant money. The feds will decide how much of that the university ultimately has to pay back. Since the feds reopened their investigation, the UW has launched its own new oversight effort with paid staff to visit each researcher's lab, examine their logbooks, and check their animals. But there are between 600 and 700 animal experiments going on at any one time at the UW, so it is an enormous task.
I had no idea. All right, thanks, Tracy.
You bet.
Well, looks like